Next, we'll want to invite Deputy Superintendent Angie Stallings. Come up, we're on item 5. Correct? Did I miss anything? I think we've covered everything on my checklist on the general consent.
Good morning,
Is
board
Sam
members.
coming up too?
That'd be
Okay.
great.
Sam Yeri? Okay, we have an opportunity before us. Can you speak to how this opportunity came before us and timing and all the rest of that? So, Deputy Superintendent Stallings.
Thank you, Chair Huntsman. Angie Stallings, Deputy Superintendent of Policy. I'll just give a little general overview to all of the items in this agenda item 5. Essentially, these are items that we've been requested as staff to expedite and get approved sooner rather than later, which is why they're not going to committee first, but coming straight to the board. There are 2 rules and 4 budget items. So we'll start with the 2 rules and then the 4 budget items. The first rule is R277124. It's our rule on teacher bonuses for extra assignments. This there was $10 million appropriated for this program, and some of you may be like, well, where did that come from? It came in the SB2, so it was included with a very large budget appropriation and some other sections of code. So if you wanted to look at the statute that governs this $10 million, it's $10 million one time, you can find that in SB2. And what the language requires of the board is to do 3 things. 1, to determine the eligibility or which teachers or people are eligible for these bonuses. Number 2, to prescribe an application. And 3, a distribution formula. So those 3 things you're going to find in here. So first, the first question is who qualifies? Essentially anyone who currently qualifies for the educator's salary adjustment. So when you see eligible, or you see teacher means the same as that term is defined in section 53F 2405, that's the educator's salary adjustment section of code. The next question you may be asking is, what is this application going to look like? It's going to be very simple. It's going to be asking LEAs, would you like to receive funds from the 10 million to provide bonuses to your teachers? Yes or no? What you'll see later in the rule is if there are LEAs who elect not to receive their allocation of the $10 million, that we will distribute the remaining funds to all eligible LEAs all LEAs are going to be eligible. Let me just state that. I meant all LEAs who elect to receive any remaining funds. So there'll be both questions. Do you want to receive your funds? Second, if there are remaining funds, would you also like to receive those? And then last, it gives the distribution formula, which is really on lines 46 through 48, where we're going to be looking at the number of qualifying teachers that an LEA has. Each qualifying teacher can only count for a maximum of 1. So even if a teacher is teaching more than a full load, they will just count as 1. And then we'll be distributing the funds that way. I worked with Director Sam Yuri on this, and he helped model what that will look like, and will be the point person soliciting or getting that application out to LEAs, and he's happy to answer any questions that you have. Along with me, I'm happy to answer questions as well.
Okay, we have some questions. Member Lear?
I have a question about the language of the rule that when I went back the bill and I actually found it in that long convoluted budget bill, it's the same. It feels like what you're telling me teachers are going to be paid these bonuses for is a little different than the very precise language of the bill and the rule. So I just wanted a little kind of understanding of that. So it says to compensate teachers who accepted a work assignment, an additional work assignment, to substitute for another teacher between blah, blah, blah. So to me, that is a little different than an extra work assignment because you had to be substituting for someone else as I'm reading this. Am I reading it too narrowly, too precisely? Was it just sort of in artful language at the end of the session? Can you help me with that? I want teachers to get this money. I'm not trying to be an obstructionist at all. I don't also want anyone to be talking to the Administrative Rules Review Committee about not being precise in for the reasons that those bonuses were, or additional amounts. So help me.
Sure. And I've got the language up there from the rule, and you may have noticed that draft 2 is worded a little differently, and
Which
it
I
might,
didn't see.
which might be more in line with the statute. So here's the statutory language. I think you stated it word for word just a moment ago. To compensate a teacher who accepted an additional work assignment to substitute for another teacher between those dates. And then if you look at the rule, it says an LEA may provide a teacher a bonus of up to $100 per additional work assignment if the teacher accepted an additional work assignment to substitute between December 2021 and May 2022. So I think they're very in line. And if we wanted to, we could just say an LEA may provide a teacher a bonus as described in that section of code. I will say that that section of code is not going to be codified on the legislature's website until after May 4th, which is fine. So it might be hard for people to find it because they'd have to know to go to SB2 as opposed to going to, typing in that section of code. Honestly, it might even change. That section of code might, when it's codified, it might actually be 525 or 526 because there might be multiple bills that use that same number, and I don't want to get too complex.
No,
But I'm happy to make any amendments you'd like.
Oh, and can I follow up?
Yeah, a follow-up, and then can you speak to, and maybe I missed it, to draft 2?
And I don't think draft 2 changes what I'm asking you, and that is, if we're giving the money to LEAs to give out this money consistent with what teachers did extra during this period of time, I am great. If there's going to be an examination of who did you substitute for and what substitute task was there, then that seems too tedious and not really in the spirit of what I thought was the point of this. So which is it? The exact, you have to find a substitution of duties, or is it just, you did this extra work during this period of time, you get a bonus?
So, Chair, I'll
Yeah.
try to answer that. And first off, I did not even review this language when it passed. So I don't believe
Oh.
USBE, I'm just wanting
Yeah.
to let you know that we didn't have an opportunity to provide comment on this language.
You would have been
So
more
as
artful.
to what the legislature had intended, I can't speak to that.
Sure.
But I will say, it states, they may compensate a teacher who accepted an additional work assignment to substitute for another teacher. So I think that will be up to the LEAs to determine what that means. We do not have any intent of monitoring or going out and checking, if that makes sense. If you look at the rule, you'll see that the only language about what the LEA may do, we essentially restated what's in SB2, and then we just stated an LEA may use the the LEA's existing policy on compensation for extra assignments to determine how the LEA will distribute grants to teachers.
I'm good.
So
That's
they'll be
good.
using their
I feel
local.
comfortable that we are taking care of the spirit of this. It's not, we're not going to get hung up or tied up, and I just hope that this public discussion of it will maybe serve us well in terms of, this is what we believe the legislature intended. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Member Earl?
Yeah, I'm hoping. I don't know. I'm still unclear on some of this too, but let me see if I can just ask a question, because I was not familiar with this coming out of the legislative session either, or the dialogue around it, and maybe most of us weren't. So if I'm understanding this right, this is money for this, this rule is just for this time period. And it's specific to anybody who had to, it's saying substitute, but some teachers might not have actually substituted for someone else. They may have just taken on additional responsibilities. So we're leaving up to the district itself, the LEA, to make that analysis. Could a teacher have substituted many times? So then it would be a qualification several times. Would that be accurate? Okay. Which I'm good for that, with that too. I'm just thinking, making sure this broadens to what the real needs were articulated during that time period. Is that an accurate statement, what I,
Yeah.
okay,
It's drafted in the singular, but it could be, a teacher did 10 additional work assignments, so the bonus could be for 10 assignments. And I don't know, Sam, if you have anything you wanted to add, or?
Yeah,
Sam Uri, you
correct.
wanna
Sam Uri, School Finance Director. And to Deputy Superintendent Stallings' credit, we checked with Senator Fillmore, who drafted this language, and we really wanted to leave it up to the LEA so that they had as much leeway to compensate those teachers who filled in where possible. And there's not, because there were teachers that were not willing to accept extra work. And so there's no stipulations on who within the LEA can get it. It's up to the LEA.
so that was my
themselves.
next question, was administratively, there may have been administration staff, or, do you know what I mean? It would only be relevant to educators? And it
So
probably
as-
says that in there.
Yes, as Deputy Superintendent Stallings mentioned, it follows the educator salary adjustment. So that would be classroom teachers, speech pathologists, librarians, or media specialists, preschool teachers, mentor teachers, teacher specialists, or teacher leaders, guidance counselors, audiologists, psychologists, or social workers.
Okay, very good. Sorry, I did read that, but I just, as we're talking, I'm just trying to think through all the different narratives. Thank you.
Okay, we've got 3 other board members in the queue. Member Cannon.
Thank you. First of all, I'd just like to say, yay. I think this reflects an acknowledgement by our legislature that during a time, I think it was exceptionally difficult to get substitutes. And people didn't want to go in with, with Omicron raging, and teachers stepped up, and teachers took care of our kids. And so I'm appreciative of this money. I do have a question, though, about process. We're being asked to approve this on first and final reading. So you mentioned it wasn't going to committee. Is there any problem with doing a rule without 3 readings? We can do it on first and final reading. Okay, then Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we approve R277-124 Draft 2 on first and final reading.
I second it.
We have a motion and a second. Do you want to speak more to it than what you just did?
No, I've spoke to it already, thank you.
Okay, discussion. Member Hanson?
Yeah, thank you. Questions about the same section that Carol, board member there, was looking at. I think this is lines 32, 33, 34. I did, when I read this, think it would be beneficial if we put in substitute for another teacher. I think that's the language from the bill there. But then between December 2021 and May 2022, it's a little ticky, but between can be either inclusive or exclusive. I think we should open that up to 1st of December 2021 to, end of May 2022 to make sure that everyone understands that, that's the full period. I know the bill wasn't written that way, so I'm asking us to adhere to the bill in one area and then maybe refine things from the bill on the other one. If those are friendly amendments, I would like to include those in the motion. I don't know if we need a motion to amend.
Okay, we have a motion to amend. Second. And any discussion to that amendment? Member, this is just the amendment that,
She's after Scott.
she's after Scott.
Thank you so much.
Okay, I'm not seeing any. Right? You have one to the amendment?
Yes, just
Okay.
a question about the amendment. You want to amend it to say teachers substituting for teachers, but there was a lot of work that went into other areas, and I don't know what the intent of the legislature was, but I have, just an example, and it is close to me. My father works at Taylorsville High School and served a lot of time in the lunchroom. Now, he's not looking for money, but that was something that he did, right? And so if an LEA says, no, you know what, thank you for your help, here you go. Is that something that we're looking at? With this amendment, would that take the right of the LEA away to do that?
I think, I'm just asking, I look at the language of the bill, if you put that up again.
Just one moment.
And I think the bill was fairly specific with that language to substitute for another teacher, if we have that. That they're to compensate a teacher who accepted an additional work assignment to substitute for another teacher.
Okay.
So not me trying to restrict that. I certainly recognize there were a lot of efforts put in everywhere. But I think that we could get crossways, hopefully not on this one, but we could get crossways with the legislature if we try to expand that to more than what they put into it.
Member Klein, you have a question? This is on the
No,
amendment.
I just think that there's a typo or something that needs to be fixed on line 12. Where it says, the purpose of this rule is to provide, to establish the ground. I think the to provide needs to be taken out because it's on the next line. It's just redundant.
Which I'm viewing as, can that be just housekeeping without objection? Okay. Where's our amendment?
I think Patty's working on it. Patty's ready. And Molly, we have you. Scott.
Well, they didn't put that in the bill, but I think that between means, it could mean just the
Okay,
months
member-
between December.
Member
and May.
Hanson, can you make sure this is
Okay.
how you wanted
Yeah, additional work
your
assignment.
amendment?
The teacher accepted an additional work assignment to substitute for another teacher. That's the bill language. Between, I'd say December 1st, 2021, and May is a 31-day month, right? And May 31st, 2022, just to expand that. And the reasoning behind that is because between can mean just January through April. I think it's fairly clear that it doesn't mean that, but it's easy to fix, so we can expand that.
Okay, anyone else want to speak to this amendment? Okay, not seeing any hand. The proposed amendment from Member Hanson that the board amend R277-124 draft 2 to delete, to provide on line 12 and amend lines 30 to 32 to read as follows. An LEA may provide a teacher bonus up to $100 per additional work assignment if the teacher accepted an additional work assignment to substitute for another teacher between December 1st, 2021 and May 31st, 2022. Not seeing any discussion. We're going to vote on this amendment. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed?
Aye.
Thank you. We got that, Molly. The motion on the amendment passes unanimously. So we have an amended motion on the table. Molly?
Yeah,
Member
We
Hart, I
already-
should say, sorry.
no, it's okay. Did we just vote on the amendment?
Yes, so now
Okay,
we have the amended motion on the table.
okay, thanks. I just need a clarification before we move forward. What's the maximum amount per teacher? How was that calculated again?
If I may, Chair.
Yes, if you would.
It's $100 per assignment, so there is no necessarily cap on per teacher. If a teacher, as we've discussed, did 10 assignments, they could get $1,000. It really is up to the LEA to determine how that's distributed within the LEA.
You have a follow-up?
Yes, I'm talking about the allocation. How is that
The,
divvied out to the district, to the LEAs?
Sam?
would you mind displaying
Oh, yeah.
that to you? So the allocation is $10 million. What we did is used the current fiscal year 22 educator salary adjustment FTE counts with a max of 1 to filter out anyone that was already over 1.0. We took a percentage of that by LEA. So For example, the first one is Alpine School District has 10.9% of the educator FTEs. They get 10.9% of the $10 million for $1,093,000 and change. So it's a very simple allocation method just based on, and it's now displayed, but just based on the educator FTEs with the same educator counts, the educator salary adjustment counts that we're using to qualify the educators that are eligible.
Thank you.
Okay. Member Earl?
Yeah, just a quick question. So our LEAs would have to then decide how they're going to proceed from there and through their own boards. Okay, thank you. That leads into some other questions, but they'll take care of that.
Okay. Not seeing any other hands raised. The motion that's before the board is that the board approve R277-124 draft 2 as amended on the first and final reading. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Next, we'll invite Director of Law Ben Rasmussen up, and we're going to go to 5.2. There's an actionable item. And as he's coming up, I appreciate staff acting quickly. I've heard a lot from the LEAs that they saw this showing up on the agenda, and they, of course, they're budgeting and want to be prepared to move this money forward, and so that's why we have some of these things before us quite quickly today. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. Director Rasmussen.
Thank you, Chair. Ben Rasmussen, Director of Law and Professional Practices. The amendments to R277-489 that are before the board this morning are a follow-up to HB 193 from the legislative session. A little over $12 million was allocated to promote the full-day kindergarten program, and the legislation really set forth what the general principles would be in allocating that funding, but staff is recommending some amendments to the rule to clarify how some of that will be interpreted. The legislature, in essence, said that USBE should give priority to certain categories in determining how to allocate the rule, and so the rule is an attempt to clarify what those categories will mean and how we'll allocate those. There's also some technical edits in the rule, as well as clarification on when the KEEP assessment has to be administered. So we also, in your backup, have attached a spreadsheet which kind of gives a projection of how the money would be allocated under this rule, and we have staff here who can answer your questions about how the proposal would work.
Member Hanson?
Yeah, I had a question on this one. I'm looking at lines 78 to 85. This is about the testing that's done, beginning and end testing. And as we looked into the effectiveness, or as I looked into the effectiveness of full-day kindergarten, we actually had a hard time getting data to show the long-term effects of that. There's a lot of studies out there, but it was back and forth as far as what was clear. And this 78 through 85 actually strikes some language that says that we can use the data from those tests to look at those sort of things. It restricts the purposes we can use that test data for. I'm just wondering, I didn't see that that was in the bill to strike that. Is that something that we think is needed, or is there a reason behind that?
Chair, may I respond?
Yes, Sarah?
Hi, Sarah Wibke, Pre-K through 12 Literacy and Library Media Coordinator. Thank you for asking that question. Those pieces were added in when we first rolled out the KEEP assessment several years ago. And so we wanted to make sure people understood the uses. However, the uses aren't specifically required in any code or anything, so they kind of felt like additional extra that people were thinking were required, and we didn't want people to think that. And so they were just removed as a way to clarify for LEAs that certainly you'd want to be looking at that for your own program, but it wasn't a requirement. And so it was basically coming from the field. We wanted to add clarity to the board rule so it wasn't so confusing.
Yep, follow up?
Follow up, yeah, I see the word may right before all of those uses. I think anyone who reads rules understands that may means it's optional, but I really have a problem with restricting the use of that test data and keeping us from, by not putting it in there, I think in some ways we could say that it can't be used for those purposes, and I think that would kind of backfire on us. We need to be using that data to see if full-day kindergarten really is having the effect that we want it to have. So I would, unless there's another explanation, I guess I would move to remove those strikeouts from lines 78 through 85. Is there anything that I'm missing? Can I ask that, Chair? I don't want to make the motion before I've heard everything that staff has to say on that.
No, I think that'd be fine.
Okay. That's my motion then, is to
We have a motion,
78 through
78
85.
through 85.
78 to 85. Motion to strike
On strike.
78.
No, to remove the strikeout.
To remove, sorry.
Yeah. So to retain the language that's right now stricken in 78 through 85. Okay.
Need a second? Second.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Oh, I just wanted to echo what he said. I have the same concerns, and I'll second that motion.
That's right. Let's get.
Okay.
Okay.
I can change that motion.
That
to
would be
say-
great.
Yeah, that we will. A substitute motion for the motion that wasn't real. I move that we accept R277489 Draft 1 with the exception of retaining the language that is stricken between lines 78 and 85. Yeah, on first and final reading.
So we're voting to approve the rule as it is with that amendment, because I have another amendment I'd like to make. Should I do that before or after?
That'd be a motion to amend. Right.
So,
Yeah.
okay, okay. Okay.
For the board, the board.
No. Retain the language.
Yeah, draft to retain. The language that is stricken on lines 78 through 85.
Point of order. Wouldn't we have to, if we approve this, then we couldn't make any more amendments? Am I correct? Yeah.
And from there.
Motion before the board is the board approve R277489
Okay.
Draft 1 on the first and final.
I'll second that. Okay. Okay. So I'd like to, well, first I have a question. I'm looking at line 120, well, 122, where it's stricken, an LEA may not require a student to participate in an enhanced kindergarten program. And then the following lines that are, can you just explain the part that's removed? I'm looking at it and I'm wondering if if LEAs will now be able to require students to participate in optional, in an optional program by taking that line out. And does that mean that the OEK is optional for schools unless they accept the funding, then it's no longer optional for the student? It was very confusing.
May I respond? Yes, I'm really glad that you asked that question. The reason for 122 being struck out is because it's already in the law. And so it was a repeat of what's already in code, and so it felt redundant because it's already stated in code and was re-emphasized when HB 193 was passed, that it is not required for any student in the state. And so it was a redundant piece, and generally we don't have redundancy within the board rules and the code, and so that's the reason why it was removed. It doesn't actually change anything.
Okay. All right, that's all I have. Never mind. I don't need to make an amendment.
Member Earl?
So do we reference the code in here then, so that I mean, I think it is not always bad to be redundant, so I'm just wondering if, do you see what I'm saying? Do we actually reference that code so it's clear?
Yeah, Ben?
The authorizing statutes are listed at the start of the rule. I assume 53F2507, is that what you're talking about?
Ben, can you pull that mic a little closer to you? Thank
Sorry,
you.
it's in 53F2507, and that is referenced at the beginning of the rule, where it says the rule is being implemented to administer those programs.
Okay.
Okay,
I think I'd like to make a motion that
amendment.
I would like to make an amendment to the motion that we unstrike line 122.
That you strike line,
No, what's the word we used before? Reinstate, sorry. Unstrike, reinstate.
122 to 23.
so it-
Yep.
okay, we have amendment to the motion. Is there a second? Do you want to speak any more to it or additionally?
No, I just think if this is an area that I think just should be very clear for schools. Even though it is spelled out in law, I don't think there's harm in this one part being in there, so.
Okay, thank you. So the proposed amendment to the motion is that the board reinstate the language on lines 122 through 123 of R277-489 draft 1. I'm not seeing any other discussion to the proposed amendment. So all those in favor say aye.
I had a
Oh.
discussion to the proposed amendment
How did I miss that?
because I was
Just last
stealthy.
second.
I
Oh,
was-
I apologize. Member Lear.
I think that the staff tries really hard to file the rule writing manual, which directs them to not repeat statutory language in the rule. And I think there are lots of things that are important that bear repeating in many of these rules, but I think it is a real important aspect of staff's work to follow that rule writing manual. So I completely agree and support the idea in this, but it's already in the statute, and I think we need to stay consistent with that direction to the staff. So I won't be supporting the amendment, though I absolutely agree with the sentiment.
Member Hutchings.
Yeah, thank you. I agree that generally that's a good rule to follow, but this point specifically, that this is optional for parents to choose if they want their student to be in full-day or part-day kindergarten, was a key question that parents asked, and we committed to them that this would be optional. So to say it again and again and again, I think is important.
Member Klein?
So I just had a question, and maybe staff can help me. In the language, it looks like that if the school accepts the money, then the kids that enroll the kindergartners have to take the KEEP assessment. Is that correct, or can the students opt out?
Thank you for asking that. Sorry, may I
Yes,
respond?
please.
It talks about, I'm trying to find the exact line where it talks about the rationale as to, so if they are in the optional enhanced kindergarten program, which is OEK, the full day kindergarten program, or the early interactive reading software program, then they would be using that assessment specifically in kindergarten.
And the parents are made aware of that the test is required if they enroll in one of those?
Yes, and while it is required, and I'm sure maybe Darren or Sid are also in the room, in case I misspeak, but while the assessment is not something that is opt-outable, if a parent doesn't want to give the assessment, I believe LEAs have made that exception.
Is that clear in the rule here somewhere?
Who else? I think staff's trying to decide who's going to answer the question. They're all fighting for the mic.
Yeah, and I was talking to Deborah Jacobson, so I missed the full context of the question. It has to do with the KEEP assessment and its presence or absence on the parental exclusion form.
Yes,
that
that
correct?
is the question.
Does the student have to take the test if they're enrolled in one of those programs? Or can they opt out? And is that clear to parents that they have the option, if it is an option?
Yeah, so I'll try to answer your question as clearly as I can, because the parental exclusion form will be in committee tomorrow, and this might connect to that. The definition in statute around tests that meet the requirements of the parental exclusion form. So I'm going to break this into two pieces. The parental exclusion form, the KEEP doesn't meet the criteria established by that, but the parental or the test itself, like many things or all things that exist in our schools, parents have the ability to withhold their students from participation in it. We don't keep participation rate information on the KEEP assessment like we're required to do for the RISE and also for the Utah Aspire Plus. So I can't tell you how many students complete the KEEP test and how many don't. So in that regard, it's an assessment that we don't have any kind of an accountability or lever to try to force students to participate in the KEEP. Although you'll see here, the educators are compelled or motivated, and if we go back to 2020, in 2021 with the pandemic, you might remember that the participation rate for the KEEP assessment was almost at the same rate that it was pre-pandemic, which illustrates an interest and value that educators and parents perceive in that assessment differently than some of our other assessments because of the content that they can get from that to make decisions for their children, and also the teachers as they work with parents to provide services to our kindergarten students.
You have a follow-up?
Yeah, where does the data go? Who all is it shared with from that test?
I don't know if I'd give Sarah the microphone back for that, because it's the program folks that use this data. So.
May I respond with a quick clarifying
Yes.
question? Are you referencing specifically like the statewide data or individual student data?
Both.
Okay, great. So the student data is uploaded into the data gateway, and then of course we, go ahead and use it to create the KEEP report, which is an aggregated look at the state overall. It doesn't call out any student information. And so the student information is not accessed by the public. Obviously, the teachers have access because they're the ones inputting the data, but no one else would have access past that.
So it doesn't go to Department of Workforce Services or anywhere else? It stays within the Utah education system?
Correct. The only thing that goes to the public would be the KEEP report.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Member Norton?
Yes, just to clarify one more thing on for this amendment. Kindergarten is still optional in all its forms in Utah. Is that correct?
You're correct.
Full day, part day, all of it is all optional. Okay, for that reason, I'm not going to support it either. I totally support keeping it optional. I think that's important, but we don't need to list it again that an optional program is optional.
Member Cannon?
Yes, I'd just like some clarification. In reading through the rule, it talks about counties of the 6th class, 5th class, so on and so on. So am I correct in noting that the less populous counties get a geography priority for this money? And then the next priority is given to those with low socioeconomics?
I think it's,
Yeah.
if I
Ma'am.
may, I think if you look at the language down near the end of the rule, let me get to it. I thought socioeconomic was actually first. So first, socioeconomic need is the first,
Oh, first. Oh,
first
so-
thing that we'll look at on
Okay.
line 158 and then geography.
So I'm just wondering, it says that those are given a priority, and we don't have enough money to fully fund this program. So what proportionality do you give, or how will you parse out the money?
Sam, is that you or Sarah?
I think we can tag team it.
Right. So you're seeing a complex spreadsheet here that's we've attempted to make somewhat readable by compressing some of the cells. So socioeconomic, and that's free and reduced lunch counts, is the number one ranking here. So you can see, at the top, Granite School District is projected, and a caveat here that these are simulated. We don't have 2 of the 4 data points that we need to distribute the funds, and that's part of the rule is an application for LEAs to give us those data points that we need. But yes, the socioeconomic is one of those data points. I'll also note that the LEA has to certify that they're ready and willing to, obviously expand. And so there's a column here that says kindergarten enrollment ready for FDK. We don't have that data for all the LEAs right now, and that's one of the data points that we need to gather. So for the simulation, it's projected that all LEAs are ready to expand with 25% more of their kindergarten population. That will change as we get the real data. But yes, after the economic disadvantage, we go to county class, which is by population. And so the 6th county class is the very smallest. I believe Ben Rasmussen is presenting, if you scroll down to Paiute School District, Wayne School District, Rich School District are some of those very smallest counties, and would be receiving those priorities.
So you don't have a percentage priority or anything? This says, you don't
No.
have like a distribution formula based on these things, or?
It's a little complex to explain in that we recognize in the statute where it directs the Public Education Appropriations Subcommittee to study moving towards providing a full WPU for kindergarten. And so there are columns here to kind of account for that. If you look, there's a current kindergarten funding formula of 0.55, and then there's the full day kindergarten funding formula of 1.0, which is the current rate for first grade for districts, and 0.9 for charters. And so there's also an attempt there to make sure that we're not funding LEAs over a 1.0 WPU for their entire kindergarten enrollment. As we, it seems like as the legislature studies that and we go forward, that may be the case once funding catches up. I hope that I'm making some sense here, but.
Can I just, is there any additional priority given to districts who are ready to implement this? All right, thank you.
Yes, that's the first qualifier, right? Because they have to be ready. The way the rule is written is they have to be ready to implement a new full-day kindergarten classroom.
So they have to have
receive the extra
classroom
funding.
space, they have to have all that kind of stuff. All right,
So.
thank you.
Member Klein?
Yes, so it looks, is this part of the bill? I mean, is that requirement to differentiate by geography or distribute by geography that's in the bill? Okay. It looks kind of like a wealth redistribution, kind of thing, which doesn't bode well, in my opinion. I had a parent contact me, she's a parent and a teacher, at a charter school in South Jordan, who alerted me that their school is now advertising full-day kindergarten with tuition. And apparently many others are also starting to do that. And I just wonder, is that somewhere in our code or in our rules that a public school can charge tuition for full-day kindergarten?
Angie's going to
Sarah?
respond.
Or who wants to speak to that? Angie? I'm trying to, when we're done, I want to come back to our amendment. We're going through a lot of discovery that normally happens offline.
Yes,
Maybe we should have a whole briefing on
school fees. That's
No,
what this is,
kindergarten.
because that's where we're going.
kindergarten that is not required and how it's funded. And
Thank you, Chair Huntsman. I didn't mean the joke. I'll make this as brief as possible. But
I
in
want to come
general,
back to the amendment when you're done.
yes, and I'll run back
Okay,
there
thank
and
you.
display it. Just to be, so a school can charge fees for things that are outside of the regular school day. And many of our LEAs, because they only provide generally, they're receiving funding for half-day kindergarten. The definition or of outside of the regular school day would include that second half of kindergarten. So there are some districts and charter schools who do that practice and have for a long time. And so as school fees staff, if that question comes up, it's up to the LEA. Now, if the LEA were receiving OEK funds or all-day K funds, they couldn't also charge fees for that same classroom, if that's helpful.
Again,
follow-up?
it's the wealth redistribution where some kids, they get that without paying anything, and then others are penalized and have to pay for it if they want it, simply because of where they live,
Respond.
their rating.
Please.
I would just say that if all-day K were funded statewide, then you wouldn't have that problem. So if we were just doing one WP full.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, will you bring that amendment back up, please? As you're bringing it up, I can remember the day where you even said full day, all day. All of a sudden, yeah, you were in trouble. But now it's very sought after. Now that it seems like the next question is, how do I get my child into your very good preschool programs or something else? So evolution. So the proposed amendment to the amended motion is that the board reinstate the language on lines 122 through 123 of R277-489 draft 1. I'm not seeing any further discussion on this proposed amendment, so let's vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? For the nays, raise your hand. Okay, all right. We're going to vote on this again. All in favor, say aye or raise your hand. This is in favor of the amendment.
I just would look really dumb if I did that.
Okay.
What are you saying about us?
All right. We have member Cannon, member Klein, member Earl, member Hutchings, Vice Chair Davis. Member Norton, are you with us?
Hart.
Hart, sorry.
Yeah,
All right, we have the amendment. Are you voting on this?
yes, I'm raising my hand.
She's raising. I got it.
Okay, I've got 6. So the proposed amendment does not pass. Okay, I'm going to put the motion back on. The motion before the board is that the board approve R277-489 Draft 1 on the first and final reading and amend the draft to reinstate the language on lines 78 through 85 of R277-489 Draft 1.
That's redundant language.
No.
Hold it. Did I state it right?
Yes, you did. You did.
Okay. Any discussion to the amended motion? Seeing none, please vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Molly, you and I.
Yes, I'm an aye.
Thank you, Molly.
Okay, thank you for, all right. Next, thank you. We're to 5.3, Deputy Superintendent Scott Jones. Deputy Superintendent Norman, I believe you're in on this too, maybe, kind of, sort of.
Let's see. Good afternoon, Chair Huntsman, members of the board. So 5.3, we put this following the rule process that you just went through. Because earlier, Chair Huntsman, you mentioned that how LEAs are grateful for the fact that we're basically slicing out key components of the budget. The overall budget will be considered by the Finance Committee tomorrow during their meeting. It's part of the Budgetary Procedures Act, so we're mandated by law. You as the board need to review and approve the next fiscal year budget, which would be FY23. However, a little bit different this year is these 4 programs and the respective budgets for these 4 programs are being sliced out and brought before the board in cooperation, conjunction, or collaboration with the rules that you just did. Now, they're not rules for all 4 of these. You did rules for the full-day kindergarten and for the 10 million for the additional assignments for the educators. However, due to the concerns about the fact that the LEAs are in the hiring window here, as we all know, LEAs make a lot of hiring decisions in the spring of every year for the next school year. So they're, again, very grateful for you allowing us, the staff, to bring these to you for consideration ahead of the normal process, which starts with the Finance Committee tomorrow and the overall budget. So with that, if we could go to the full-day kindergarten budget. Now, keep in mind, all we're asking you to do here as an action item is to approve the budget, not the distribution method. As Sam or Director Uri had brought up before, there's still, in relation to, or for example, of the full-day kindergarten, there's still additional processes that take place. We're just asking that you approve these 4 budgets, so to speak, for these 4 programs here today as part of this action item. So I won't spend too much time on this because Sam already oriented you, Director Uri oriented you to the budget, and where we're at, how much progress we've made so far in the distribution method. Again, we're just looking for approval of the budget. The other one is the early literacy. If we could pull the backups for that one. I'm not sure who's connected. Oh, okay, sorry. No, you're good. You're good. Sorry, Hans, thanks. Yeah, so we provided this to you in the backups as well for the early literacy consideration and the budget for that. Again, that stems from SB 127, Senate Bill 127. Then I guess what's the next one, Ange? Ethnic studies. This is for a half-time position, a budget for a half-time position, which was felt strongly that we needed to ask this be put in front of you. Again, consistent with the hiring processes that are out there to try to find the most qualified individual to fill this position. And then the last one is the 10 million, right? Yeah, for the, yep, yeah. So those are the 4 programs. So back to you, Chair, for any additional questions or concerns from board members. And we appreciate your consideration on this particular action item so that we can move forward with our LEAs.
Okay. Member Earl?
Yeah, I just want some clarification. So all the items in here that we're approving will actually come back for further, right, a contract. For example, on the $900,000 we're approving for age-appropriate books or e-readers or whatever, that contract will come back before us. So the $900,000 is not an approval of that money to be spent. Is that accurate?
So it's approval of the funding for that, for the budget, to budget for that. Yeah, as we go out and we pursue RFPs, then those particular contracts would come back to you.
to us.
So, yeah, and so what I should have clarified is not only are you not, you're just approving the funding, right? The budget for that particular program here today, right? The additional steps or processes like contracting, like distribution methods will come back to you at a later date. It's just the aggregate amount that we're pursuing your approval on today. Yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
and then I have another question on the early literacy. This is exactly as spelled out in law? Right. We're not taking any liberties on that?
so.
This is their requirements. Okay. And one other question, if I can? Oh.
Yeah.
This has to do with the ethnic study, just because the information in here has a number of numbers, but the number we're looking at is the $74,000
For the FTE.
for the FT.
The
That's
budget
the
for
only
the
thing
FTE.
we're approving on that one.
Today, yes, ma'am, is for the budget for that purpose.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
And it's part of a sequence of other things, but you got to
Yes.
get it in the budget
Yes.
and then before you
Right.
act. So
What it does is, if I may, Chair, what it does is it allows for LEAs to start the process. They understand that, we're very clear with them, these are estimates. There's still work to be done on distribution method as it pertains to the FDK, but it allows you, because you've directed, as the board, and you're meeting the Budgetary Procedures Act, to move this forward a little bit faster, because of the month delay. That's all. You're just approving a portion of the budget here today.
Member Hanson?
I have a question related to the ethnic studies bill, and relates to the amount of money that's set aside. So if I understand it correctly, there's going to be a commission that's created, and that commission is going to make recommendations about how components of ethnic studies should be integrated into our core standards. Then it looks like all of our core standards need to be updated because there won't be an ethnic studies core standard. Is that correct? Is that what we're thinking?
Pat? Dr. Norman?
Yeah, Deputy Superintendent Patty Norman, in answering that question, the goal is to not create new standards, but to make sure that, for example, in the social studies standards, those things are already embedded within. So being able to identify those, not to open all of the new standards that are already previously there, but just to identify them and moving them forward, especially in areas that are currently up for adoption.
Follow up?
Follow, Chair. So am I correct in assuming there's not going to be an ethnic studies core standard?
That is correct.
So everything will be integrated in the current core standards for all of the subject areas that are laid out in the bill.
Chair, may I?
Yes.
Yeah, and the belief that is, in reviewing some of what this says in the bill is that most of that is already in there. So there's not going to be a lot of new additions that are within there.
Okay, one more question. Just on schedule, I noticed that the bill says by August 1st, 2024, then the LEA is going to have curriculum instruction materials for teaching ethnic studies. And if that is driving our core standards revision, I wonder if that's enough FTE to do the work that's required in the time that we're looking at, because we're at 2022 right now. If they're going to be core standards rolled out and they select curriculum and materials, I don't see that happening in 2 years if we're on our current pace. What we do with core standards. Is that something that staff has considered, or is the workload less than what I'm imagining it's going to be?
May I
Yeah,
speak?
please.
So currently, our understanding is that it's not going to be that big overhaul. It's really going to be the identification, similar to what we're doing with that vetting process. Are we creating and having those areas? For an example of this could be, maybe this might be helpful, an example of this could be that we're not putting in place a lot of new curriculum, but instead it's about the teaching practices of it. So we're including in there where a student might have that voice choice and ability to select if they're teaching about heroes, then they can select their own hero, but there's teaching the standards that go to it instead of having one that's already defined for them. So that ability to have those broad understandings to bring in those studies from within and the cultures that are within that those students have themselves.
Okay, just one more, Chair, I'm sorry. But it looks to me like that what's going to come out of the commission is going to be more prescriptive than that, with what the commission is tasked with. And I just have that concern, I guess. I'm fine to approve what we have today. I'm just worried that's not going to be enough to get it done in the time that we're looking at.
And I believe this is all about budget, and these are great questions on next steps and where all this is going, but
And I'm wondering, Chair, just if the budget should be doubled or tripled in this area to get it done.
yeah, it could be.
More manpower.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You want to follow up?
follow-up is always yes. With that, just being really precise. So I think right now, as staff was envisioning it, the half is what they felt would meet those needs, and then maybe being able to come back to the board as the work is further outlined, and then ask it as it comes, future-facing.
Member Booth?
Chair, I just have a motion when you're ready.
I can take a motion, then people can still ask clarifying questions.
All right. I would move that we approve the specific program budgets for full-day kindergarten, early literacy, teacher bonuses for additional assignments, and ethnic studies.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. You want to speak to the motion?
No, I think we're ready to vote. I'm ready. I don't know if anybody else is.
Okay, discussion to the motion then. Member Straight?
Yes, I appreciate the questions from Board Member Hanson. I am 100% in favor of the integration of the curriculum. I'm concerned about process maybe a little bit, because it identifies 10 legislators will be chosen and then 2 others. I'm concerned about our inclusion in that process, and that it might be more limited than I'm comfortable with. So that's my only concern. I think the intent of the bill is awesome. I've been discouraged in reading that some individuals have referred to this bill as critical race theory. I do not believe that's an accurate depiction of that. Going to another element, early literacy. The funding, it didn't receive all the funding it wanted, but I was very pleased in that where they put the funding that was given was put in the most appropriate places. So I see some very positive things. I like the direction, but would like a little more involvement by USBE in regards to this process. Thank you.
Member Earl?
Yeah, as far as the date, I think a law is only a law till the next legislative session. If there's a need to expand that out, I think it's better to do that than try to race through something just to do it and say, oh, we hurried and did it, to where we're doing it thoughtfully and as appropriate, and I think especially when we're talking about standards. And so it may be appropriate for us to ask an extension on that as we get down the road, instead of trying to just hurry and race and put something in that's not thoughtful. So I think that's just in our consideration there, to keep that in mind, instead of trying to expand out and hurry and throw a whole bunch of people in to just try to meet a need, to be thoughtful as we go through our processes in our time frame.
Good, thank you. Not seeing any other comments. The motion before the board is that the board approve, I'll just shorten it just a little bit unless somebody objects to it, that the board approves the 4 proposed program budgets. I could add during the April 7th meeting, but I don't need to do that because we're in here today. So the motion before the board is the board approve the 4 proposed program budgets. Not seeing any other discussion. Board members all in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed?
Aye.
We have 1 no. Okay. 5.4 has been pulled.